Good morning. Welcome to part 5, I think this is now, of the writing course. And as you can see, the weather's dulled down a bit today, a bit more Scottish. Today it's about characters. Characters are what populate your novel. They're what bring it to life. It's what the readers live through in terms of points of view. And some of the things that I've noticed as an editor and proofreader over the years is, there are some do's and don'ts regarding these things. So obviously you need to decide who your protagonist is, in other words, who your hero or main character is. Then you need to decide if there is an antagonist. There usually is. Most fictional drama has at least one, which would be potentially the villain of the piece, depending on the genre that you're writing in. And then you have your supporting characters, your sidekicks perhaps, family members, friends, and you have to decide what kind of role they play in comparison to your main characters. And then after that, you have a bit more leeway in terms of who populates your story, who populates that world that you have constructed. So certainly, I think I've mentioned this a couple of times now, with your early chapters, don't be too tempted to cram in all the names of all the characters. I think this comes often from debut authors or authors who are not quite confident, and I think it's simply a way of box ticking, of making sure, I've got all those characters written down at the beginning, so they're all established, so I can now just go on with the story. Don't be too tempted to do that, because it's difficult for the reader to take on board all those names, all that information. So I would break down, if you can, that this kind of goes back to this chapter breakdown, this synopsis that we did at the beginning. What to do is, and it will help with the structure of your novel, it will also help with the editorial process, which you will probably have to go through later on. What the best thing to do if you're a debut author, I think, is to choose one character per chapter and use that character's point of view. Now, it can be a lot more complicated than that. There's lots of variations on this. You don't have to do it this way, but I think just for the purposes of creating a fairly straightforward and easy structure for yourself as a debut author, this will help you. So for example, you might have your prologue, then you'll have chapter 1. So let's say chapter 1 features your main character, and it's simply an introduction to them, and it's all from their point of view. So chapter 2 might then be the antagonist's point of view, or someone else's. As long as all these characters' points of views are helping to further the story. And we'll go into that, I think, at a later date. That's where it gets a bit more complicated, but for now I'm just trying to give you some very basic tips for setting up the template for your novel. So that's that. The other thing I've noticed, that there's a tendency sometimes for authors to bring in a character right towards the end of the book. Most of the time this doesn't work, and the reason it doesn't work is because the reader is focused on the climax of the actual story, and it almost feels extraneous to bring in a series of new characters towards the very end, unless there's a very, very good reason for it. So it might be that we have a key character who appears, or it may be a red herring. It may be that you had a character who went by a different name, who then turns out to be someone else. Might even be a character who is constantly referred to off the page and who we haven't actually seen, but we are aware of them because other characters have spoke about them. So we've built a picture in our heads about who they are, and then perhaps they finally appear towards the end. So all those things might work for you, but I would by and large try and avoid bringing in any characters who are not intrinsic to your story towards the end of the book. And I guess the other thing is you need to make your characters real. So that, again, that's something that's a bit more detailed, and we will go into that, I think, at a later date. But to give you a starting point, you know, you don't always have to discuss hair colour, eye colour, things like that. Readers will generate that in their own minds, actually. Oh, I always believe when you're describing a character's physical attributes that less is more. And sometimes it's not a bad idea to avoid the obvious things like, you know, grey blue eyes, steel blue eyes, that kind of thing, unless it's really intrinsic again to that character's nature. The fact that they have steel blue eyes might match their manner in some way. Maybe they're quite a cold person or very strong, you know, and you're relating the steeliness of their eyes to the steeliness of their physique or how they behave, that kind of thing. So try and be a little bit inventive in terms of, you know, how you create these characters. Often the best way to do it is actually through simply observing how they behave, how they interact with the other characters, you know, through dialogue tags, action beats and things like that. Again, those are things I will go into. So it's just to give you a kind of starting block for creating characters. And also, for the whole book, I would try and avoid too many characters as well. Make sure that the overall arc of the book is primarily about your main characters or your main character, depending on the genre you're writing. Make sure that, you know, the balance is there, that you don't have too many points of view going on. Otherwise, it's difficult for the reader to follow it. Again, unless there's a very, very good reason for it. Historical books sometimes have, you know, several points of view from several important characters, for example. Fantasy books as well. So you can do it, but certainly as a starting point, I would try and just, you know, keep it in your head to make sure that less is often more. So that's part 5. I think what I'm going to do now, because I think that's enough for the first. I mean, we could call this the end of the first course. So what we've done is we've set up a synopsis, word count, how many chapters you're going to write. We've done a little bit about character, point of view, just some very basic things to get you started. So what I'll do is I'm going to be away for a few days. As of next week, I'm going to be travelling down to London. And I will probably put up some more posts between now and the beginning of the next course. And I think what we'll do with the next course is to touch on some of the more detailed aspects of writing your novel, such as dialogue tags and action beats that I mentioned earlier. And we'll see how you go on over the next few days. So it gives you a few days just to work on these 5 points, these 5 exercises that I've set up, and see how you get on. And at some point, it probably won't be until about this time next week or thereabouts, I think. So about 5-6 days time, we'll see. I will begin the next course. Okay, so I hope this is helpful to you. Thank you for all the likes I had yesterday. That was really nice to see that these exercises do seem to be appreciated. So that's really nice to see people liking and starting to follow me as well now. So thank you very much. I've been Ian Skewis, editor, and I will see you soon. Bye.